is when we smell.
Right.
And that's who it is.
I'm going to interrupt and not be any more rude than we've been by holding our speaker up. This morning we have a wonderful speaker from my neck of the woods, actually, West Bloomfield. I live in West Bloomfield. The speaker today is the recent past president of the West Bloomfield Rotary Club, but more importantly, he's the superintendent for the West Bloomfield School District. So we thought we'd ask Jerry, and he stepped in kindly at the, not quite the last minute, it was a couple of weeks ago, but to give us a chance to hear from somebody in the school systems to talk about this disaster that's going on all around us and see how it plays out with the school district. So Jerry, I'll leave it up to you.
Good morning, Phil, and good morning to everyone. I believe I know most people on the screen, and it's great to see you all again. As Phil said, I think catastrophe is definitely a way to define what's happening. This COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the world, our nation for sure, our state, and it's really had a profound impact thus far on education. My role as superintendent, it's been the last 4 months, starting with, I'll say, when some of you were at the PETS training, I believe, in Kalamazoo, and you know what happened there. Well, about that same time, we were planning for a staff development type of activity, and we switched on the Wednesday prior to the Monday being shut down because we heard from some rumblings that there could be maybe a shutdown in the world of education. And long story short, we had a professional development day that we didn't plan. I called a snow day. Excuse me, our dogs are. Cindy will take care of the dogs. Anyway, we had Friday the 13th. That's an interesting day. And I called it snow day. There was no snow, of course. I just said we need to do a cloud learning planning day. And I called that day on the Wednesday prior because it was evident that something was going to happen. Well, the Thursday night before, the governor said all schools are going to be shut down as of Monday. So we let the kids out on Thursday. They're thinking they're having a snow day on Friday and they'll be back on Monday. The teachers are thinking, well, we're going to do some planning in case something happens. Then all of a sudden that Friday hit and it was real. We had to turn on a dime and convert from total face-to-face, in-person, traditional instruction to a totally remote learning environment where the teachers had to set up their offices or teaching stations at their homes, their kitchen tables, their basements, their bedrooms, wherever. Students, we had, fortunate we have Chromebooks. We're a one-to-one school district. And so we had all of the students have Chromebooks, and those that forgot them or misplaced them or didn't have them, we had a distribution point on that Monday and we distributed Chromebooks everywhere, hotspots to families that needed Wi-Fi connections. And we started school on the 16th of March, totally remote. I will characterize that as crises education. We were in a crisis. We had to turn on a dime. The staff responded, the students responded, and the world of parenting all of a sudden changed to parenting / educator. And that was a huge shift for everybody. So we made it through from March through June. I will say limping along on this cloud learning. But during the March through June period of time, we were seeing evidence that this COVID-19 would not go away. And so we started planning and have come up with, as most school districts in the United States, and I dare say Canada, have been doing. And so in West Bloomfield, we are still in the process of formulating our plan, but we have a fairly good idea. And I'm writing an article for my local school newsletter. And in the beginning of the article, it dawns on me that this is the first time in my 40-some years in education, we're a month away from school, and I really have no idea what it's going to look like. There's plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, and we could be anywhere from totally remote to anywhere from fully face-to-face. All likelihood, we're either going to be fully remote or in what I will call a hybrid kind of situation where it's partially face-to-face and partially virtual or remote. Now, we were successful in the March through June period of time because the teachers over the course of a year have a chance to build relationships with their students. And so when we went from totally face-to-face to totally remote, the classrooms had a relationship with each other, the students, the teachers, and everybody knew each other. And so that's way different than what we're facing this fall, where there will be new classrooms, new teachers, new groupings, new schedules. And if we start that in a totally remote fashion, it's going to be very different and difficult to build those relationships. And if you've been a teacher, and I see some of you on the screen have been, it's all about the relationships. You can do online learning and go through the technical learning, knowledge building, but without those relationships, a lot of students do not respond and they do not grow and develop as they should. And so my biggest concern going into the fall, because we're a people-intensive industry, anybody that's become a teacher or an educator doesn't do it for any other reason that they enjoy working with people. They enjoy and love working with young people. They have a passion for making a difference. And it's all about the relationships. And so put yourself in the situation of you're a teacher and it's going to be the first day of school, or you're a student and it's the first day of school. And you know how kids are, at least in my experience, the first day is so exciting. They put on their best clothes. They're happy in the morning and they're a little anxious because they're going to meet new friends and who's this teacher and all of that kind of anticipation. Well, in a virtual environment, I don't know how that will work. I mean, we're going to have to be very creative to come up with a way to build virtual relationships similar to what we have here. We can see each other, but we can't see each other. We can't feel each other. It's different being on a screen than person to person. So there's a demand for a number of reasons in our system, our country, our state, locality, to have that face-to-face. The problem is COVID-19 it's not a political issue, it's a medical issue. And until we have assurances that we can control and or vaccinate for COVID-19, parents are very, very anxious for what's going to be happening with their students. And so in West Bloomfield, we have developed a plan where it goes from totally remote, parents will have that choice, to a hybrid plan to face-to-face when it is safe to do so. And so we are looking at a plan where if it were, like right now, the governor came out with a plan for schools to follow where there are several phases, phases 1, 2, and 3, where COVID is fairly rampant and not really going away yet. It's still active. That's a totally remote learning environment. Well, Michigan just came out of phase 3 a while ago. We're in phase 4, where we're not seeing declines yet like we had been, and we're creeping back up. So in phase 4, it's possible to have face-to-face instruction, but there are a lot of physical restrictions, a lot of mitigation we have to do, wearing face masks, social distancing, PPEs, hand washing, testing temperatures, all of those things come into play. And so we've decided to have a hybrid plan for phase 4 that works with students. 50% of the students are there at any time and 50% are learning at home remotely. And that's for grades K to 8. if you know schools, and I know you do because you've been in them, it's not possible to socially distance 1,800 students or even 900 in a comprehensive high school. So our high school has 1,800 students in it. If we socially distance, we'd run out of space right away. And the way the rhythm of a school works, you're changing classes. And so when you change classes, you're mixing up students. And it's not possible to have teachers keep students in one solid cohort and have teachers move around because students have different needs and different schedules. So our plan for phase 4 for high school is totally remote. We're not even, we looked at several options for trying to schedule and keep social distancing and all of the mitigation factors at play. And for high school, it was virtually, no pun intended, virtually impossible. So we're going to a virtual environment in our high schools. Now at the elementary and through grade 8, we will have the cohorts of students coming in, and we will be having 50% of the students in a class in the morning. Then there'll be an hour and a half where we can do cleaning of high-touch surfaces, etc. And then the afternoon cohort would come in for their 2 hours and 50 minutes of instruction. So it's 2 hours and 50 minutes in the morning for one group, and then they go home in the afternoon and have another couple of hours of remote instruction, and we flip-flop that. We're doing that 4 days a week. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Then on Wednesday, we're doing deep cleaning, and the teachers are going to be planning, because if you're a teacher in this environment, you're not only teaching face-to-face, you're also planning remote instruction. And just a couple of thoughts on, or bits of information. We've surveyed our community a couple of times, and we've surveyed our teachers, and we're continuing to survey. In our survey, we found that 30% of our families do not want anything to do with face-to-face instruction. They want totally remote. Oh. And so because of that, when we divide our class in half, they're going to be small enough, because 30% will not be in school. So on the hybrid model, we'll be servicing 70% of our students, and that 30% will be doing remote instruction. Teachers responded to a similar survey, and because of the factors of teachers, their ages, underlying health conditions, etc., we have about 30% of our teachers who do not want to be face-to-face when COVID is active, because they are vulnerable. And so we're working with those 30% of the teachers, and we are giving them the option, and they are preparing to be the remote learning specialists, if you will, within our system. And so we're devising, they will be working on the remote side, and the other 70% of the teachers will be working on the hybrid model or face-to-face plan. And so you can imagine that we have approximately 400 and some educators in our district, and the professional development that we've been doing has been just nonstop since June. We've switched our learning platform for remote to a more robust learning platform, so it's easier for teachers to plan, easier for students and parents to access, and easier to conduct assessments to see what they are learning, etc. And so this has been a very, very busy summer that way. We do not have 100% unanimity of thought amongst teachers or families. And so put that as the sort of what's happening in the background of our nation, our country. Somehow in the United States, probably not Canada, the COVID-19 mitigation and fighting this disease has become political. And that has really complicated the equation, because we're not political as educators. We want to take care of students, have them in healthy, safe environments, and we don't want to be used as pawns in this political chess game that's going on. And I see it every day. I'm seeing it really come out now in Washington, D.C. All the talk is we're going to make these kids go to school, and regardless of health and safety conditions, and that's become very frustrating, because that plays out at the local level as well. Some of the feedback that we receive from community members is of a political nature, and it's like it's disheartening. It is what it is, but we need to maintain our focus on the health and safety of students. Now, I'm sort of rambling. I'm going to stop in a second so you can ask questions, because I think what's on your mind is probably a better for this format than me going on and on. But the key in this whole equation is, what can we do to have safe, healthy learning environments for all students, whether they're virtual, whether they're hybrid, or if we get to phase 5, it will be fully face-to-face. And how can we do that in a manner that is efficient and effective? The costs are staggering. We put an order in the other day, and our order for the PPE for our district, and this is the first order, was over $500,000. That's for face masks, that's for hand sanitizers, that's for temperature things. I mean, it goes on and on. And that was the one order. And so I can foresee that our costs will probably be increased by a couple of $1 million over the course of the year by this plan. As we're talking about that, because of COVID, the state of Michigan revenue is down by a couple of billion, $2-3 billion, and we are facing a cut of maybe $2 million. So if you take the $2 million extra cost, the $2 million cut, that's a $4 million differential. Our fund balance is gone after that, meaning that we will be pretty close to broke as a school system. And so the political conversations going on in Washington, D.C. and in Lansing I'm following those very closely, because whether or not we can be successful is going to be dependent on what plan eventually comes out. And to be used as a political football in this discussion is disheartening, as it's not a partisan issue. We should be trying to do what's best for the students of our nation, of our state, regardless of the politics of the situation. And I don't see that happening. And so that's a compounding factor in this whole conversation. We are prepared in West Bloomfield to move forward, and what we came up with in some of the choices, I want to just elaborate on one of them. It's called Lakers Online. For those 30% of students whose families do not want any face-to-face, we've developed a very robust online option, and we call it Lakers Online. And so students will sign up for that, families will sign up for that program, and they'll be totally virtual, and the commitment is for semester by semester. And so they would get all of their learning, their coursework online. That works really well for the upper grades, high school. Arguably for the middle school, elementary is a lot more difficult, because the relationships really come into play on the elementary level. But we do have online for elementary students as well. And so we've been promoting that and trying to give families a choice. And so those that are not happy with our hybrid model, because it is rather complicated, they will be able to go online if they want. The problem is a lot of people want total face-to-face like right now, and that won't happen. And everybody wants that, but until we are through with the COVID, we won't be able to do that. Our school board is in a really difficult situation, because they need to make this decision probably by next week so we can finalize our planning. And so we have school starting in West Bloomfield on August the 26th. And so we are 1 month away, 4 weeks away, and we still don't know what we're doing. And that is a daunting situation to be in. And so we are having to be flexible and creative and come up with a solid plan, and we will do so. But the challenges are really, every day they become more and more. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion. You think you have a problem solving it. Well, what about this? Well, what about that? Well, that's going on. And I need to commend the staff within West Bloomfield and other districts all across the nation, really, because they are just tireless in their efforts to come up with solutions. And the focus is on students and student safety and student development. And we're doing this in a context of a political and health crisis. And it has become stressful for a lot of folks. And I just look forward to the time when we can get back to pre-COVID and focus more on the typical teaching and learning challenges of student learning gaps and social emotional learning. And I just want to talk a little bit about social emotional learning in this situation, because I talked a lot about relationships, but students that are struggling socially, emotionally, online learning really doesn't cut it. It's not a vehicle that's conducive to having supports on the social emotional line. And so within our plan, we are having opportunities throughout in the hybrid plan for smaller groups of students to come in and stay longer periods of time even, and work with counselors or social workers or in other means. And there's a big, heavy emphasis because what's happening in people's families, whether there's unemployment, whether there's death, there's a whole lot of things that are happening that students are finding they're needing to cope with, and we need to be supportive and understanding and supportive of their needs along those lines. And so we have a full-time psychologist who's working with all of us, and that's a staffing issue. It'd be nice to have about 5 or 6, 7, 8 of those types of people, but we will be attending to the social emotional learning and support that students need. But to do that remotely is not as effective as face-to-face. I'm going to sort of pause, and I want to just respond to any questions that you all might have, and we can go back and forth.
I have a question for you, Jerry. My son runs Success Virtual Learning Center in Waterford. He's the director there. And it's a school that particular center he started with. It was a new building, and he built it to about 250 students. And their entity has loaned him out to Detroit and Pontiac and different public schools to, which he is a public school, but they've loaned him out to train teachers on Ingenuity, which is the program that they're using for virtual learning. And he said that as he's been working with teachers on this new system, it isn't the training of the system that he's been doing a lot of. It's a lot of dealing with their own anxieties about teaching virtually, and kind of building confidence in the teachers that they can do this and they can build relationships, and just explaining what they've done with they're a hybrid system. They have a school building, kids can come in for instruction, but they also learn online. It's whatever the student wants. So he was saying it's really the anxiety of the teachers right now that they catch on to the virtual learning pretty well in terms of how to train it with virtual learning. It's just their own confidence level. Are you finding that with the public school teachers?
Yes, if you know teachers, and like you know your son, teachers are, some of them are very perfectionist, and you want to be on top of things, and you want to be well planned, and you want to be able to anticipate what's going to happen, and you do your very detailed lesson planning, and to switch from that kind of mode to a totally foreign concept from March. We had a lot of that going on in the springtime, and we have a lot of teachers that work in teams, and so they would be supporting one another. So a lot of this summer has been exactly what you were talking about, Ginger, where we've been working with teachers on, they're not in this alone. We do a lot of professional learning groups within the schools and district, and actually virtually is a good way to do professional learning groups, because you don't have to, the logistics, you just have a Zoom meeting and you can share ideas. On a statewide level, I've been working with a team of educators statewide, some of them from private schools, some of them from virtual schools, public schools, through the Michigan Virtual, which is an online learning organization within the state. And our big emphasis there has been exactly what you described, is how can we bring teachers along and increase their capacity to both understand the mechanics of it, but more importantly, to how can you establish relationships online. And you can. I mean, it's not impossible. If we spend enough time together as a group of 12 or 13 people, over time we would be able to learn about each other and establish relationships. They'd be a little different, but we could do that. And the other thing with teachers that I find is that they're touchy-feely people themselves. I mean, they want to be around kids, and the hugs.
The hugs.
Yeah, the good morning high fives in the high school, the nods in the hallways, it's just a constant flow of relationships. When I go into school, the kids do that with me, and I'm not there very much. And they, hi, Dr. Hill, and they want to talk, and they want to tell you what's happening. And so those are the aspects that are really tough to deal with. But I agree that we can learn from each other. And so we've been tapping into people who do work in virtual environments or hybrid models, and learning from them how we can better handle that aspect of what's happening.
I would love for you and Jesse to talk. He's the president of Waterford Rotary.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jerry,
something like a choir or the band, the music programs, how's that going to work?
So it's interesting, Jeff. We have a very creative music department, and they have come up with all kinds of ways technologically to teach those subjects. Now, we will not have big performing in-person concerts and groups or plays when we're in phases 1, 2, 3, or 4. We get to phase 5, we can do it. But in the other phases, we can do small ensembles, we can work online. There have been several performances that were virtual performances at the end of last year that our middle school choirs did, our high school choirs, and they were, in my opinion, it was difficult because they were over Zoom, and Zoom technology isn't quite as crisp, and you lose the quality and you don't really hear, and it's just not as satisfying. So we're looking at other technologies that can be more appropriate for that. But we've come up with a scheme, some strategies for teaching music, choir, band, orchestra online, and the teachers are really hard at it. There's a lot of software out there too that we've invested in that will be beneficial for those subject areas.
Jerry, is there any collaboration between adjacent districts or counties like Livingston and Oakland County or the other school districts? Are they kind of going on the same page as you?
Yeah, good question, Jane. The school structure in Michigan, we have Oakland County, Oakland Schools, which is 28 school districts, and we collaborate all the time, the 28 of us. And then there are several statewide organizations there's a statewide organization of the service centers, and there's been collaboration along those lines. And so through those collaborations, we've come up with a menu of options, if you will, that school districts can consider as they're putting together their individual plans. And so there's not a lot of variation. I mean, you're either going to do totally remote, some form of hybrid, or if you're face-to-face, how do you appropriately mitigate COVID-19? And you will see that school districts in Michigan are all over the map. We had Lansing that came out the other day. They're going to do total virtual to start with. I heard on NPR this morning that Ann Arbor is starting the year totally virtual. And so several school districts are going to start totally virtual and see what happens. Others are going to say, we're going to be back face-to-face 5 days a week. And we in West Bloomfield are in the middle. We're not going to be back 5 days a week face-to-face, and we're not going totally virtual. We're going to have a hybrid. But within the hybrid model, there are so many different options. And we had been thinking along one line for quite a while that we would have half of the kids be there on Monday and Tuesday, Wednesday off, and the other half of the students come Thursday, Friday. And then we try to put that to a schedule, and it wasn't working. So then we went to this half-day model. Well, our parents had already heard our other model, Monday, Tuesday there, Thursday, Friday virtual, Wednesday virtual. Then when we switched, they felt like, well, the rug was pulled out from under them in a lot of cases because they weren't involved in all the discussions. And so now we're working with families on how this half-day model will work, similar to years ago when they used to do half-day kindergarten. You have your morning session, your afternoon session. Well, that's sort of the way that would work, but it's very complicated if you're a family for childcare. And so we have come up with a cloud care, we were calling it, where we will provide at a very reasonable cost, $15 a session or something. If families need to have the afternoon virtual piece, childcare, we will have that, and we'll have it set up in places that can accommodate that as well. Then the challenge becomes then you're remixing students again. The whole point of the half day is to try to keep students in one group so they're not interacting with 400 kids or 150 kids, or interacting with 20 or 15 students. And so it's the collaboration is important because nobody has all of the right answers or all the answers, and we just need to share ideas. But the local contexts are so different as well, so there need to be options for to choose from, and that's where we are on this whole matter.
Thank you.
What kind of medical statistics matrix are you looking for to help steer you in what kind of direction?
So we're depending on the local health department and the governor, actually. She has based her phases 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the medical trends, if you will. And in phase 1, 2, and 3, that's when there's a high incidence of COVID, and it's not really flattening, or it's increasing. In phase 4, there is a flattening of the incidences. It's not necessarily growing. And then in phase 5, there's been some steady decline. And in phase 6, it's a lower level. And the challenge that the governor is having is, because this has become a political or personal issue, the people of our state aren't universally following any guidelines. Most people, when you go out, it looks like they're wearing face masks now. Not everybody. When the state reopened a little bit, you saw a lot of parties over Memorial Day, a lot of parties over 4th of July, a lot of congregating of young people in bars and on and on. And so we see now the COVID incidence rates have been going up. And so there's been a big push to remind people that because we're opening doesn't mean we are back to normal. So it's a lot of what happens in the schools is dependent on what happens in the broader community. And until people get more serious about it, we will continue to have a problem. And I look at a country, I'll say Italy. Early on, Italy was a disaster. And they implemented the stay at home, they implemented social distancing, wearing face masks, and their incident rate has flattened to close to 0. And they were in terrible shape right about when the COVID hit us in New York City. You can take the state of New York, see what bad shape they were in early on. Now their incidence rate is very low. And then you take other states, and I'll just say Florida. in Texas. And early on, those states didn't have a lot of incidences of COVID-19. And Cindy and I have family in Texas, and we would be comparing, and their cases were a lot lower in number. And so they didn't have the sense of urgency. And so the governor of Texas and Florida, they opened real early, and now they're paying the price. And so in California is another example. I mean, California, they were one of the first states to do stay at home, and they had sort of flattened the curve, they thought, and then they opened up, and now they're leading the nation now in COVID. And so it's a matter of, we need to be persistent and consistent in what we do as adults, following the guidelines in the stay at home or the social distancing, wearing face masks, all of those factors, not gathering in large groups, for this to be effective. And because we're such a diverse nation, and we have pockets that are doing it right and pockets that are totally ignoring it, we're in this for the long haul. I look at Canada's statistics, and they're pretty impressive. And I don't know, Barry, what's going on in Canada, but you're able to address this a lot better than we are in the United States.
So those farms, huh?
Let me get yes, I was just going to come in here, Jerry, an excellent presentation, I might say, as we communicate across the border. Removing the politicization, I got feedback here. Removing politicization, as you referred to earlier, I do believe we have less of that here in Canada. I will note that we closed down the same day you did, Friday the 13th, and still closed. Schools closed on the following Monday. Well, what gets me, Jerry, is that you could make that presentation over here in Canada as a school superintendent, and I suspect that the message would be entirely the same. And we have a daughter and son-in-law that are both in elementary school education, and just talking to our daughter last night, they don't have any idea what it's going to be like when the schools open up here again just after Labor Day. But there's a lot of planning going into it, and there's going to be 3 different phases. There's going to be full virtual, probably more so than not, all the way up to the hybrid of 50-50, but I don't think the hybrid will be 50-50, maybe 30-70 at the first point. So congratulations again, Jerry, and I'm glad we're able to participate here today. Carolyn's with me here, and she is a teacher background, and certainly follow the conversation here.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think in my conversations with teachers, they're really, really anxious right now, because if you, to a person, every teacher wants to be with their students, and also they want to be responsible, and they don't want to jeopardize themselves or their families. And so you're in this quandary, how can I do both? And so that's probably why we have 30% of our teachers who only will do remote learning. There have been a lot of discussions amongst teachers on how to have it both ways, and there really is not a way to do that. We just have to minimize the risks. And if we minimize the risks, some of them will be willing to take the risk, others will not. And so it's a terrible situation to be in as a professional educator, because in a lot of cases, it's a no-win decision. I mean, you're either going to harm students, or you're going to put yourself in harm's way, or your family. And that's been a major conversation. So when you see teachers unions in Florida, as an example, where the governor is mandating full face-to-face 5 days a week, that will not happen. The teachers in Florida will not do that. And it's something that whoever is advising the governor should have advised the governor differently. In our state, I feel that if the trend keeps going like it is recently, I think our governor could shut us down again. in terms of schools, not necessarily the economy, because she's a little bit more sensitive to the plight of teachers and families, and the whole issue of the economic recovery. Everybody understands that we need to have an economic recovery no matter where we are, but that won't happen until we get COVID under control. You can't will, we're gonna recover economically despite this. It's not, that's not reality from my perspective anyway. So,
Jerry, do you have enough testing to know if your school or any other school becomes a hot spot?
we'll find out.
I think
Yeah, we have in Oakland County, there are several testing sites that are available, and theoretically, yes, there are. But I've heard just recently that Michigan, the testing results aren't coming back quite as quickly because the labs are overwhelmed with the numbers, and until that gets under control. So we have a test, but if you don't get the results back in a day or two, it's not much good, because how do you do that contact tracing if somebody tests positive if it was 2 weeks ago when you had the test? I mean, it's just exponential how many people that person maybe was in contact with in the intervening time. So I'm going to say, yes, we have it, but as we test more, it becomes more difficult to get the results back quicker.
Jerry, have you heard anything from what students think about the Zoom learning versus the in-person learning?
Yes, and I'll use our granddaughters as just the most personal contact. One of them just doesn't want anything to do with the online. She's really a bright girl, but online is not her thing, and she would just as soon not do that. The other one, I think, is fine with it. What we hear from students in West Bloomfield is that for some students, it's pretty effective because they're self-motivated, they're disciplined, they can work well in that environment. Other students who need more support or have more difficulty in learning, it's not been effective. And then you have students that, I'm going to talk about our special needs population.
I was just going to ask about that.
I mean, we say we can do virtual learning, but when you're working on an IEP, an individual educational plan, and that requires a lot of individual instruction, doing that virtually is really difficult. So in our blended model or our hybrid model, because those students usually are in classes of 10 or less, we can have those students all together and socially distanced within that classroom. And so we're looking at doing that. Any students that have any degree of difficulty are going to find it more difficult in a virtual environment than in a face-to-face personal environment, in my opinion. So it's not, what's probably happening is we're probably increasing that learning gap between students that are very capable online learners and those who are not. And so when we get them all back, it's going to be, our learning gaps will be larger than they were before.
Okay, we've got a 10 minutes left. A couple more questions, and then we'll let Jerry go.
Jerry, I just had one comment actually that was leading to what you were saying. 3 of my 4 children are teachers, and one of them teaches sign language to autistic children. And so they've been doing some virtual teaching, which now requires that the parent be sitting right there in order to keep those special needs child's attention. It's very difficult, more so for them than our average learners. And one of the things that my daughter-in-law is noticing is that the parents are being really stressed because they are used to having a little bit of a respite. Having a special needs child is stressful, and they're used to the child going to school. And so I'm wondering, are the school districts reaching out to parents in any way to provide them some type of support?
That's a great question, Ginger. Now, people go into education because they love it, and people don't go into education for the opposite reason. So So if you're a parent and you did not go into education, you're not prepared for this. And I think being a parent teaching your own child is far more difficult than being a teacher teaching other children, because you don't have that credibility. You know, the teacher is like on a pedestal. The kid's just my teacher says, you know, and so I saw feedback from a daughter to one of the father was overhearing her talking, and this is during the midst of the parents doing all this help. She said, "I can't wait till next year when I get a different teacher." She was referring to her dad. So it's not an ideal situation, and it's not, a parent's role is to be a parent, to expect them to be capable of all the nuances of being an educator is really a stretch. Now, what I will say on the bright side of all this, teachers' jobs are now probably more highly respected than they were previous to this, because it is not something that anybody can do. And so it takes training, it takes a different kind of personality, it takes different kind of strategies, and they don't come naturally. And so maybe at the end of all this, teachers will be more respected as a profession than they had been previously.
So Jerry, how do you handle your stress? It sounds like you're into this 24/7.
Yeah, Cindy and I were talking about that the other night. I said, I'm going to take a vacation day. She goes, "Oh, well, what are you going to do? Turn off your phone?" It's been about 24/7 for most of our educators. The superintendent role is to be as supportive as we can be of the people doing the frontline work within the school district, and I have a strong team that I can depend on and work with, and the 5 or 6 of us at the central office that are on the, I'll call my cabinet, we've been working 24/7, but the people the principals, the consultants, the teachers who are planning and presenting the staff development, they've been working hard. And so I don't think we could do this forever. The last 4 months, Barry, have felt like maybe 4 years. And
It has to be.
The pace is there because it has to be, but to sustain it over a long period of time would be very difficult.
And no hazard pay.
No.
Jerry, you have to watch
And a 5% pay cut to teachers. Yeah.
You just got to watch your hairline there, Jerry. Be careful.
Oh yeah. That was a gone thing before this started. So I don't have any of those COVID cuts or whatever. It doesn't apply to me. So
okay, one last question.
I want to conclude just by saying thank you for the opportunity to speak with everybody this morning. I think that as we go through this process, my realization is that people need to work together, and we need to collaborate, and we need to be supportive of one another. And I think Rotary is a great example of how resilient the organization has become with changing how we work virtually. And I thought about that the other day. Our district being half in Canada and half in the United States, and we can't get together because we're not allowed to. We just have other ways to try to get around that. Well, it's the same thing. This group this morning, we have people from all over, and this is a way to work together and to continue the work of Rotary, and that's the same thing is happening in many industries and organizations. So I'm proud to be a Rotarian. I'm proud to be an educator, and at the end of the day, it's all about serving people and making life better for those maybe less fortunate. And in my world, the students that we serve need just all the support we can give them, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that matter the most for us and for our future. So, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Jerry. That was excellent. Just remember, everybody, this recording will be available probably sometime later today. May not always, but sometime later today. It'll be on our website. You can go to virtual meeting library. There's a choice on the left-hand side, and you can play the recording of any of the past 8 or 9 meetings. So whenever you get a chance, you can do that. And thank you all for attending. I'm going to end the meeting unless there's anything critical to discuss? I think we're good to go then. Hey, thanks all for attending.
Thank you all.
Thanks. Excellent meeting.
Thank you.